Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the continuing mess concerning Brexit and the small sector of our economy that was supposed to be the golden boys, fishing, along with the lies that the government have told to try and avoid the blame for it, but have come back on them. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So throughout last year, a lot of people thought that fishing was going to be a big winner in Brexit. Others tried to point out that this was one nonsense, because you either get a deal with the EU which is similar to what we have now, or you take back your quotas but then can't sell your fish. Brexit couldn't possibly simultaneously screw over the countries that mostly bought the fish and have them buy even more of that fish into the bargain. Secondly, it was pointless because fishing is such a small part of our economy. But the likes of Nigel Farage tried to say, yes, but we'll grow the fishing sector. You could have grown it to 10 times the size and Brexit would still have been a huge net cost to our economy. But also it wasn't possible to grow the sector with Brexit, only shrink it. But Farage knew better, and the fishermen, oh, it actually seems to have gone quiet recently, doesn't he? He's actually gone, has he said anything about fishing in 2021? I've not heard him say anything about fishing in 2021. But anyway, he was an idiot anyway. But the people who actually should have known better, people who worked in that industry, fell for it hook, line and sinker, if you'll pardon the expression. Then, as the Brexit deal was agreed, just 1 week before it was due to take place, it dawned on the industry just what Brexit meant. Then, on day one of Brexit, much of the industry was immediately buggered. A lot of fishermen were told to catch less because delays caused by paperwork and checks meant that they couldn't get their product to market as quickly. So there's no point in catching as much, we can't actually get it all there. They were the lucky ones. Others found that their catch was now worth much less because it wasn't as fresh by the time it got to market. It commanded lower prices. Some never made it at all. Some of the returned fish could be frozen and sold for less, but a lot was just left to rot. Fishermen talk now of having to go out in more dangerous conditions in order to make enough money. And it's already a dangerous enough profession without that. Some have already died. Now, I don't know whether that is because of the greater risks taken or whether it would have happened anyway. Like I said, dangerous profession. If it's the former, then Brexit has already claimed its first lives. But then that's all right, isn't it? Because we remember that the government refused to say that Brexit wouldn't cost lives. But there are whole communities who can't trade at all. Those who catch the bivalve mollusks that we've heard a lot about, mussels, oysters and so on, which brings me on to George Eustice, the government minister caught out in a lie. So as I've mentioned before, the line coming from the government as soon as Brexit happened was that they were totally surprised that the EU would not allow live bivalve mollusks to be traded between Britain and the EU. Certainly the way they were behaving, they gave the impression that they thought it would all be sorted out with some health certificates being developed by DEFRA, which is the government department covering, amongst other things, fishing. I mean, I remember the way it panned out. You know, they couldn't sell these things. DEFRA said, and I talked about it at the time, they said, not to worry, we're going to be developing these health certificates and then it'll be fine. Oh, when are they coming? Oh, around about April, we think, end of March. Even then, at the time, I'm thinking, well, hang on, the season's here. The seasons, you're not just costing them a quarter of their annual income. You know, it's at a time when they need to be selling. But anyway, there it is. There it goes. But then they said, the EU said that no, this isn't the case at all. You can't just make up a health certificate. You know, if the mollusks are not fit for human consumption, they cannot enter the single market. That is the rules for third countries that, ironically, the UK helped implement as members. These rules have been around for years. We helped put them in. But that's not what you said before Brexit, complained Eustice, the minister in charge of DEFRA. And all the time this was happening, fishermen dependent upon this trade were finding themselves with no customers. Learned a little bit myself as well. So the issue with the live bivalve mollusk is the water. So the quality of the mollusk is very dependent upon the quality of the water in which they are living. So you have Class A, B and C water. Class A water is fine. If we have oysters, mussels and so on farmed from Class A water, it's actually fine. If they're in Class B water, then they need treating first. Then they're fine. I think Class C water is basically, you can forget about it. So most of our water is Class B, which means that most of the bivalve mollusks that we farm needs treating first. But we don't really have much in the way of treatment facilities in Britain. And we're told that it wouldn't be financially viable to build them either. So it's not like we can, over the long term, do this. So we used to send them elsewhere in the single market to have them treated. But now that we're not inside the single market, we can't do that. And the rules state that these things cannot pass into the single market. Now, if they're farmed in the single market and transported to another part of the single market, that's fine. But we don't have access to the single market. There is no single market for us. I cannot emphasize that enough. When we sell to countries that are in the single market, we're not selling to the single market. We're selling to those individual countries who all have their own rules. They only have common single market rules for each other. But each individual country's rules, because you know they're sovereign, is different for third countries that can do what they like. So Eustice claims that he didn't realise this. Of course not. If he had to admit that he knew that entire fishing communities would be completely screwed by the government's hard Brexit, then they would have some explaining to do. So Eustice wrote a letter to the EU Commission a month ago to say how surprised he was at the EU's apparent change in position over this. That this rule seems to have been invented and a marked departure from what he had been told beforehand. The EU apparently responded by sending him a copy of his own letter predating Brexit, in which George Eustice himself wrote about the impending ban on the export of wild harvested live bivalve mollusks from Category B waters. So not only did the EU not give him any assurances, because I said at the time, well, George, if you're saying you had these assurances, can you publish them? Can we see them? So what we're seeing here is not only did the EU not give him those assurances, which I don't think we really need to guess at, that the trade could continue outside the single market, but we've got proof here that Eustice knew very well that the trade would be banned. He even wrote a letter talking about it last December, so he doesn't get to claim surprise a couple of months later. But of course, he had to try and convince people in Britain that this is the EU's dirty dealing rather than his own. Because now fishing industry representatives have been telling Parliament that businesses are going to fail. They were told that there were very serious considerations about relocating business to the EU where that were possible. I mean, that's happened for a lot of sectors. So fishing would then join the long line of sectors where businesses move from Britain to the EU in order to remain viable. And where that isn't possible, many will go bust. And whichever occurs, it's still jobs lost in Britain. And so the lies will need to continue in order to cover up the earlier lies, as well as the promises of improvements for the future which will never come. It's what they do. They lie and they promise shiny things very soon. Always the good times are in the future with this lot. For example, I saw a report a while ago that the government are setting up a task force in order to resolve the export problems of Scottish fishermen, as if Scottish fishermen somehow have a different export problem to the rest of Britain. The reason for this task force will be purely because the vast majority of politicians are comfortable attacking Brexit in Scotland in a way that is much less so in England and Wales, especially England. And you can tell that this task force is just a distraction designed to keep the volume of anti-Brexit attacks down because it was only announced a month after Brexit. It was a reaction not to Brexit, but to the furore surrounding the realities of Brexit. The government knew what the export problems would be a long time ago. Why not set up the task force as soon as you knew what the issues would be? That way their recommendations could have been implemented before it became a problem. The reason is because they fundamentally don't care about those problems, only how the problems are seen. And once you understand how the Conservatives see a problem, you also see how they're going to seek a solution. The problem for Boris Johnson and his Brexit government is that they magnified the small fishing industry to mammoth proportions in order to sell Brexit. However, fishing has been arguably one of the most badly hit sectors in our economy. But it's still magnified from the pre-Brexit period. People still talk about fishing and want to know how fishing is doing because it was magnified by them. The government know that fishing will continue to be buggered with their intended Brexit line. So that's not the problem for them. The problem for them is that people can see that fishing has been buggered when it was supposed to be boosted. The problem, therefore, is one of perception. So the solution will be an attempt to help those fishermen move out of the public picture. It won't actually help those fishermen. It will be to stop the rest of the population seeing their plight. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.